Y'all, I'm Krista Sampson, and I'm here with Victor Sampson, and welcome. Thanks for being here today. And I will hand it over to Vic.
Fantastic. Welcome to our webinar, exploring our new books. Today we're focusing on the 9 through 12, or the high school books that we have. So let's get started. Once again, Krista will be moderating today, so she will be watching over questions and things like that. I will be doing the presentations, the presentation part of that. So for those of you who are familiar with ADI and have kind of seen it around for a number of years, we originally started off with these 4 high school books, Biology, Chemistry, Physics, and Physics Volume 2. And what we just did is we released a whole new set that are tied to NGSS and Texas, so a whole new 8 books. And what we really wanted to do is kind of explain what these books are like and what's going on there, and how they are kind of different than the older ones that were published in, it's getting close to about 10 years ago now. So let's kind of go over that. The first thing that we think is pretty cool about our new books is that we wrote them using our updated ADI instructional model. So as I was mentioning before, ADI has been kind of around for a while. So we first came up with the idea for this about 2007, actually back in my classroom. And then from there, we started doing research on that. Around 2012, we released this version of it. We call this version 2 of ADI. And that's when it was really around this kind of 8 stages, and our graphics didn't look as good at that time. But this is kind of how we wrote the investigations in those original books that came out at that time. Then about 2020, after about 8 years of kind of classroom research, modifying things, looking at ways that we can do things better, updating based on new findings in the research, we introduced the model version 3, and we've been using that one since 2020, so about 5 years now. So all of these brand new books have this new updated ADI model. There's a lot of overlap in it, but the stages are a little bit different. What we've done for this graphic is to be kind of a way to kind of keep in mind what goes on. You can think of each box as a stage of things that you do during ADI, and the dots inside are activities that the kids engage in as we go along, right? So the task stage has 3 activities in it. The reflex stage has 2. And you can kind of think about that as we go. And that's actually how we divide up our teacher notes when we get into talking about the book, is by these activities to make them easier to follow. Now, since we are using the updated ADI instructional model in the new books, our new books now have brand new investigations. So you might have a similar title of ADI in biology, but the new ones are completely new investigations. So what I try to do is take a snapshot here of the new table of contents, so you can kind of see what's going on in here. So each of our books have 8 or 9 investigations, depending on how the standards laid out. These are for the NGSS versions right here. So you can see kind of biology on the left, chemistry on the right, and then earth, space, science, and physics for NGSS. Physics covers a lot of stuff, so we ended up having a few more investigations in there. Then for Texas as well, for biology, we have unique investigations that are aligned specifically to the TEKS. Same thing for chemistry. IPC, which is a unique course that's unique to Texas, where NGS states tend to have an earth, space, science course. And then physics once again. And notice that there are different investigations in each one of these because there's different sets of standards to focus on. Another thing we're really proud about our investigations is they're all 3-dimensional. And as people are learning about 3D instruction and different people are kind of sharing their ideas about that, there becomes different interpretations of what that means. So from the NGSS perspective, you can think of 3-dimensional instruction with this graphic. So the 3 dimensions of science become the disciplinary core ideas. Those are kind of the concepts, the theories, the models, and laws that are important in each discipline. Then there's these practices that people engage in to try to figure out how the world works. Those are things like planning and carrying out investigations. And then there's something called cross-cutting concepts that are these frameworks, that are these ideas that go across discipline that are really helpful to use as a lens of trying to decide what to focus on when you're collecting data, when you don't have a disciplinary core idea that can answer your question directly. So those are each of the dimensions. If you focus on those independently, you're kind of looking at one dimension, right? So if you're just focusing on concepts, one-dimensional approach. If you're just focusing on how to do science or the scientific method, that's one dimension. When you start doubling them up, then you become two-dimension. The most common way of thinking about two-dimensional instruction is kind of the inquiry approaches that we've been talking about or using in a number of years in our classroom. 5E is a very common example of that, where you're engaging in practices to learn about a concept or to learn about a cross-cutting concept, right? So like a disciplinary core idea or a cross-cutting concept. But the idea is that you are kind of discovering these ideas by engaging in these practices. When you start thinking about three-dimensional, that's where it's unique and you bring all three of these. So instead of learning really about the core ideas or the cross-cutting concepts at the end of your inquiry, you're using these ideas, both the disciplinary core ideas and the concepts, as you engage in practices to figure out something else. And that's what we call, that thing you're figuring out is what we call phenomena. Now, that's the NGSS version of this. Here in Texas, we still have these three dimensions in our new standards, but we call things a little bit differently. So the disciplinary core ideas now become just disciplinary content or concepts. And those usually be around TEK 6 through 13 in each grade. And then the cross-cutting concepts are recurring themes and concepts. And those are for TEK 5. And then all of the earlier TEKs are all the science and engineering practice. There's still a focus on three-dimensional instruction and wanting to integrate all of these at the same time. We just use a little bit different vocabulary as we move across states. Hence why we wrote different books to make it easier to kind of jump across contexts. The other thing that we've really tried to do with our new books is we want to really have an investigation that targets a specific performance expectation in the NGSS for the NGSS books that are 100% aligned with the core ideas of cross-cutting concepts and the science and engineering practices that make up that performance expectation. Same thing within Texas. What we wanted to do is make sure that we were focusing on actually three different types of TEKs at the same time. So a disciplinary content, a recurring theme, and then multiple science and engineering practices. So we can get all three dimensions in all of those. So let me give you an example of what that might look like. So here for the NGSS, one of the performance expectation is to plan and conduct an investigation to gather evidence to compare the structure of substance at the bulk scale to infer the strength of electrical forces between particles. Okay. So the investigation we designed for that is called different melting points of cooking fats. So when you break this down on this investigation, they're not really necessarily trying to learn about the electrical forces by the end of the investigation. What they're trying to do is answer the question of why do cooking fats have different melting points? And then they use these dimensions of science to make sense of that. So in this case, they'd actually engage not only in the planning and carrying out investigation SEP, but also about asking questions, developing models, analyzing interpreted data, and so forth. Then what we do is we introduce the specific ideas that are found in that performance expectation. So you can see on the left, the disciplinary core ideas are things like structures and properties of matter. So we talk about that specifically, structures and properties of cooking fats. And then we also start talking about types of interactions as well. So we look at the different forces that exist between molecules as a way to plant ideas, not so much explain why specifically cooking fats have different melting points, but these ideas that can be used to do that. And most importantly, then we also bring in the cross-cutting concept of patterns of how can we use patterns to help make sense of what we're seeing, right? So looking at the differences in these different kinds of cooking fats, is there patterns that we can see in their trends as a way to make sense of what's happening. So really tying all of that in nice and clean. On the Texas side of things, we do the same thing. Now, for Texas, we don't have performance expectations that are listed as three different kinds of TEKs added together, But what we did is we still followed that system. So we would take a science and engineering practice. We would take one from multiple of those. So kind of the ones that are about collecting data, one about kind of analyzing data, and one about communicating explanations or engaging in argument. And then we would take the concepts for high school is just concepts, but in the younger grades, we would use it with the recurring themes as well. So let me show you how this works. So this one, for example, is called spray paint waves. So the phenomenon in this is they actually attach a can of spray paint on a spring and have it go up and down. And then they pull a piece of paper and you can see this wave that's formed of that. And they need to figure out how does changing the spring attached to the mass of the object exchange that motion. So they start playing with the kind of spring that's in there. So they can start talking about ideas of masses on a spring and simple harmonic motion that gets pulled in from directly of the teaks that they need to know about. They start talking about waves, same thing of that piece, and then starting to think about the practices, like how do we go about analyzing data in meaningful ways? So thinking about graphing data with regressional analysis. So as you're thinking through this is physics kind of piece of that. So you really have all of this key pieces that you need to focus on from the TEKS in there. In addition to helping focus on the science, one of the big things that we're proud of is that all of our 3D investigations give students to not only a chance to learn the science, but a reason to develop their literacy skills. One of the things that we hear repeatedly is kids need to be able to read, write, speak, and listen to be successful in anything they're doing. And that really can't just be the English language arts teachers. For us that are into science, we have special ways of reading, writing, speaking, and listening that kids need to develop if they're going to be going into a science-related career or pursue a science degree later on. So when you start thinking about that, all of these elements that we've added into these new investigations in our books are designed to really help students develop their literacy skills. So whether you're working from Common Core, Texas, the reading we're doing is not just scaled reading or find specific words. We're asking students to read over a text and try to find what information is useful for trying to figure out something bigger, mirroring what you would do outside of school, right? So instead of answering analysis questions, you need to look through, you need to read in order to say, well, this might be helpful, or this could be useful for what I'm doing, or that might be something I need to keep in mind. So we have the reading going through on that. And that's why you can see the kind of the structure of the handouts look a little bit different than that. Also for the speaking and listening, we have kids talking to each other as much as they can, and not just talking at each other, but talking with each other where they're sharing ideas, giving each other feedback and responding to that. It's a big part of Common Core and the Texas English Language Arts Standards. And then finally, the writing that takes place. Writing is one of the most important things that you can do in any field, especially in science, whether it's a science-related career or in practicing in science. So the Common Core sets that out as discipline-based writing, and they talk about writing arguments that are focused on discipline-specific content. Texas, we talk about the importance of drafting, revising, and improving our writing at all times. These are built directly in there. So by doing these kinds of investigations, kids are getting the bump of literacy development for free, basically. Number 6, because they're so literacy rich, they also become language rich. So we can create learning environments that support new language acquisition using these kinds of investigations. So there's a whole sets of standards that you may or may not be familiar with. If you're outside of Texas, most folks are using WIDA as their standards for looking at language acquisition, which is learning a new language which is often English in our schools. So you can think about these things are very specific to science. So in grades 9 and 10, they have to be able to construct scientific explanations that describe reliable and valid evidence. Kids are not going to get a chance to do that just from reading out of a book or working on a worksheet. They have to engage in these kinds of practices. The same things that we'll see in the ELPs of the importance of kids being able to speak using content area vocabulary, or narrate, describe, or explain information, or persuade orally with increasing specificity and detail, right? So all of these opportunities are built in here so you can give kids more opportunities to develop a new language, and not just use it in everyday forms, but also use it in very specific scientific ways by interacting with their peers and getting feedback at all times. Next one is that what we try to do with all of our investigation is, because we developed the new version of the ADI instructional model, we were very considerate and thought a lot about how you can divide a investigation over multiple days. So what we've done with those way we've broken up the stages is they can very easily be split into 50-minute time blocks and done over a period of multiple days. And we give advice about how to do that. So here's a quick little graphic. So if you're teaching in 50-minute periods, day one, you can do the first two stages, and then day two, the next two. Day three, you do your share stage, and then day four, you do the reflective discussion, and you start on your draft, your report. Day five, then you can peer review and do your final. So it's a really nice, easy way to go through kind of a 5 days, 50-minute periods. If you have longer periods, like 80 minutes, a block schedule, it also breaks up really nicely, right? So day one, you can do the first three stages, day two, the next two, and then the day three, the next two. So we have these broken up really in ways that make it easy, where there's natural stopping points, so you don't have to restart and review everything as you're moving through. Next one is, the books make the investigations for easy use. So one of the things that we spent a lot of time on was working on the teacher notes. Teacher notes can be overly dense. They can be hard to follow. They can give too much information, too little information. So we spent a lot of time working with teachers about what would be the most helpful thing. And this is what we are able to come up with. And we're pretty happy with how this ends up looking. So like, if you look in the teacher notes here, you'll always start with an overview of the investigation. What's the question? What students are figuring out? Then advice about how you can break those stages into 50 minutes. So you can kind of plan that out. Like, this is going to be Monday, this will be Tuesday, this will be Wednesday. You have all of your standards alignment in terms of science, language acquisition, and ELA, all there on that. So that's what you're going to be addressing in that investigation. Then we include information about what you need to know about the core ideas and the cross-cutting concepts. Those are often unfamiliar. I know when I was learning about science, learning how to teach science, there wasn't such things as practices, cross-cutting concepts, and core ideas. So it's nice to be able to read up on those and what those mean. We outline all the materials you'll need for any of the hands-on investigations, plus describe how to set it up, including pictures of how to do that. And then we break into the actual facilitator notes based on stage and activity. So for example, on this one, this is the task stage for stage one. And I'll tell you the total time for the stage needed, the grouping that you need. And then we break down the standards into learning goals that are tied specifically to what they'll be doing during this stage of activity. So not the entire investigation, but the smaller stage. And then we break down by the activities, the kinds of things that you'll be doing. So how long that will take, what you're grouping, what to do as a teacher, what to say, what to do, what to give out, and what to show. Those are all in boxes. That makes it super easy to be able to kind of just open this up and quickly review. And then we add a bunch of teaching tips and ways to it to support students that have unique needs in your classroom. So we call that attending to equity. So what can you do to help your students that need the extra help or need some pushes to even go even further? So those are all built in there on that. The other thing that really is cool that comes with the books is we created a new tool or a new feature in our Learning Hub that we call it the Book View. So when you order one of these books, you'll have a code that comes with it. And then when you create an account in our Learning Hub as a teacher, totally free, you enter this code where it says add a new book there once you log in. And that book then appears in your library because you bought it. Then when you click on that to view that, it takes you to these cards that have each investigation. There's one card for each investigation that's in that book. So the book has 8 investigations. You'll have 8 of these cards. And you'll see across the top, we have different tabs. So you can look at standards, the materials that you want to. This has a tool that allows you to see standards beyond what's in the book. So let's say you're using an NGSS book in Texas. You can then look at what standard or what TEKs are specifically addressed by that NGSS book, even though in the NGSS book, it's labeled with the NGSS. Same thing if you're in, say, Florida, and you need to know what a Texas standard or a Texas written investigation would align with. So you can click on that. The other 2 really cool features under the investigation tab is that you have the handout button, which allows you to download all of the handouts into color so you can print those out so you don't have to copy them out of a book. And you have what we call the presentation mode. When you click on the presentation mode, it brings you to this view, which is basically a slide deck that we've already set up for you. So this is all of the information that's found on the handouts. So you can hook this up to your computer or your smart board or your projector. You show this on the screen and you can actually click through it with your clicker. And then you can guide students through this. You can click on any of these images, it blows them up bigger so it's easier for kids to see and they can see it in color because we all know handouts don't copy. Fantastic. And includes all the videos and all of those pieces. So it's a pretty cool feature that we're running in there. Last 2 things that we're pretty happy about. Number 1 is we want to make sure all the students are actually having a chance to make sense of data. So kids are doing science in each of these investigations. So they're either using a simulation or hands-on material. The simulation, there's links that you can get to that if kids are just going online, or we can have those also embedded into our Learning Hub for the kind of the organizational accounts, whatever works best for you. But in the, so you can see the kind of simulations that are work like this, that's shown in the presentation view as well, so you can see it. But in the books, for each investigation, we have that layout of what you need, including the pictures of setup. And then we have kits for each one of those, so you can order those. So you can source them yourself or just come to us and get a kit. Same thing in the back of each of these books, we have the master's material list, so you can find everything if you need to order or just look through your closets of what you've already got. Or we have a kit bundle that allows you to get everything you need for all of the investigations in the book in one bundle that you can just order. Super simple on that. And then finally, the last thing that we're really happy about or excited about is that we really tried our best to make sure that we're giving district schools and teachers a lot of choice and a lot of flexibility with this. So what we try to do is lay out how these are aligned and how they can be used and why they're useful. But we want to really make it up to you that you can choose how many of these you want to do, where you want to put them into your curriculum. If you've adopted a curriculum and there's something that's missing a piece or you're not happy with that, you can substitute in. Right? You can use these investigations as a foundation of your curriculum and then fill in the gaps with other activities. It's up to you. But what we wanted to do is give as much choice and flexibility so you can tailor things to meet your needs in your district or your unique context. So that's the big overview. I think I talked a little longer than I was supposed to on that, so we might go a second over or so. If there's any questions here, I can answer those real quick.
Are the new investigations all in the hub?
Yes, so every single one of those. So you've got 2 versions of the way that is. So we kind of think of our accounts as individual teachers or organizations. The individual ones, you get the book code, those pop up into your dashboard, you're good to go. If you have a part of an organization account, you get every single investigation that we've ever written is in there. So all of the books, all the grades, all of those things.
Awesome. Another question from Andre. What do you suggest for teachers that are new to ADI if they get this book?
So that's always the tricky thing, right? So for me, I think one of the biggest things is new to these ways of teaching, right? So as I mentioned earlier, I didn't learn how to do science this way. I didn't learn how to teach this way. So one of the things that we tried our best to do is to provide as much support and scaffolding. So it's almost over scaffolded at the beginning of all of the extras in there for helping students in terms of graphic organizers and the tips and the sentence starters are all there already in there. And then all of the notes talk through that. Then we also have on our website a bunch of videos so you can see any of these in action. And you can watch kind of what this ends up looking like. And we try to keep those short and sweet to the point. But if you really read over if you really take the time and go through that and read that, it gives you a lot of information for getting started. And then, yeah, like I said, the tips and hints in there are really helpful. And I also think the Learning Hub, that presentation mode makes it so much easier, right? Like it's up there on the screen for you. You don't have to make anything. You kind of click through it and then you can focus on your interactions with the students, right? Answering their questions, giving them nudges, helping them think about things in different ways.